Hi, everyone. It's Denise Brown from the Caregiving Years Training Academy. Thanks so much for being with us. We are going to talk about the 17 caregiving systems from the perspective of Swapna, who's actually in India, and she's going to share her experiences, which we're going to see as global experiences. It's not just related to a country, it's related to the caregiving experience, regardless of where you live. So Swapna, thanks so much for being with me.
Thank you so much for having me here, Denise. It's a pleasure to contribute to the caregiving systems, and there's some great work that you've been doing with the caregiving.
Okay, so tell us a little bit about your caregiving experience.
Okay, so to begin with, I think I'll tell you who I am. I am a person with a life science background, biomedical research, and a public health background. So I am a mother, and I am also a caregiver for a Down syndrome adult who lives with us. And the caregiving experience that I'm going to largely discuss about today is about my father-in-law who was impacted with HCC, that is hepatocellular carcinoma, which is in simple terms, again, is liver cancer. And so this is the experience that we're going to talk about. And it's largely personal, a lot of experience that I'm sure many similar families would have gone through.
Okay, so you were great about reviewing all the 17 caregiving systems before we met today. I'm curious, which systems would you say you most have navigated and managed within?
So I think the most I managed and navigated was within the hospital system, the medical system, because for us, diagnosis was unexpected. It was an incident that happened because it was an emergency when we diagnosed. So my father-in-law, he is a non-smoker and he's a non-alcoholic. So in our families, we have this tradition of doing preventive checkups because we don't have it in the system imbibed in Indian medical system, but then of late people are getting very careful about doing the preventive checkups very regularly. So we have been doing this preventive checkups for both my father-in-law and my mother-in-law regularly every 6 months. And in these checkups, we did notice some anomalies like the ultrasound was done once in 6 months, and the ultrasounds did show some lesions on the liver. And the patient is an AFFID patient, which is a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. So so this is like pre-diagnosis, like even before the caregiving journey begins, I'm telling you a, a situation where, all this, how this caregiving system was even, we got entry into. So the running from pillar to post in the medical system was a huge thing for us. We kept going back and forth to the gastroenterologist, to the radiotherapist, because then we had a lot of, because we were so persistent, the doctor advised, okay, let's get a CT scan done. And even this CT scan did show lesions. The problem there was, this was just pre-pandemic, when the pandemic was just hitting in somewhere in March 2020. And the gastroenterologist was not very convinced that this patient might have HCC, might have hepatocellular carcinoma. So this particular situation that we've been running about with our concerns was almost as lengthy as 2 years. 2 years is a very long, where we have something, grinding our mind that something is wrong, but why are we just, relying too much on Dr. Google? But no, that was not the case. And so yes, it was a misdiagnosis, and it was a missed diagnosis because a cancerous liver cancer tumor was, classified as a benign hemangioma, which was classified as something that is not to worry about. And exactly 20 days after we get this justification from a panel of doctors that you don't have anything to worry about, just exactly 20 days later, this particular patient, he collapses on the floor suddenly after his dinner, saying that he's experiencing bloating for a while. So that was an emergency situation. And when we go to the medical hospital, we are clueless because we really didn't even imagine that, this must be something to do with the liver. We are guess because the patient is 73-year-old. So we are guessing it is probably to do something with the heart. The ER is guessing this is something to do with the heart. So everybody is thinking of the organ heart, right? And we are clueless. I have a whole folder in front of my hand. Thankfully, I have that folder in my hand. If not for the folder, the doctor would have the medical duty doctor, the one who stays late in the night, the one who is of, comparatively, he had lesser experiences dealing with patients, but so he was so smart enough to, even process the entire information that we had in the file and say, hey, I don't think so, there's a problem here with the heart. I think we should do an ultrasound and see if there's a problem in the abdomen, because the latest scan does show a lesion. So that was a turning point when we were able to, take the patient for an emergency surgery and stop the bleeding that was happening inside the liver. Then this was 3 procedures the patient underwent in a period of say 2 years. So 2 major surgeries. One was embolization, they call medical embolization, where they stopped the bleeding, and that was almost 1 week of stay in the hospital. And we weren't prepared, let it be, with regards to family, because we have a complex family in our house. We all live together. So my family depends on me, myself, and my husband. And I have 2 young children at that point of time, who are just probably 8 and 10-year-old. And my sister-in-law, obviously, she is confused and stressed because she is a Down syndrome adult, as I have told you earlier. And my mother-in-law, who obviously doesn't understand these kind of complex things, and she's scared and terrified of what is going to happen. So on the home front, there is no one to look at them, but the medical system, this is the thing that is going on in the family. But the medical thing was so complex that we stay 1 week with the hospital, then we stay for a month in the hospital because he undergoes a major hepatectomy. And after a year, we spend almost a year with the hospital. We run in the hospital every 21 days for the immunotherapy. So the largest time that we have interacted is within the medical system, I would say.
So the systems that I wrote down as you were talking were hospital, medical, family, nervous, which is our stress, and then
Yes.
relationship.
Yes.
So which system would you say was the hardest to really navigate and manage?
Here, I think the one that was very difficult to manage was a social system. For us, very difficult to manage, because the first question that we would get from our, apart from the healthcare, the second immediate system that impacted was the social system. So in the social system, what was happening is people would ask you all different sorts of questions. There's a lot of stigma attached to liver cancer, where people assume things like, oh, is he a smoker? Does he drinks? Those sort of things. And then we had to either keep quiet and not disclose this diagnosis to anyone within the family circle and friends, because the kind of conversations that they would have with the patient is going to terrify the patient rather than, motivate the patient. So there was very less empathy that we knew that's going to come around. We did notice a couple of, and all of this happened during the pandemic, right? And so we did a couple of video calls to encourage him, to tell them that there is a social support system. But honestly, even if not for the pandemic, even if people started visiting after the pandemic, we saw that there was a lot of, sympathy for them, which was harming the patient eventually. The patient himself got very stressed and he went into depression thinking that, oh, this is liver cancer, this is huge. I have not done anything wrong in my life. I have not had any bad habits. What will happen to my daughter after I die? What will happen to my wife? What is your security system? So this social pressure was something that I think that was the hardest for us.
Every interview that I've done, I always have a moment where I'm almost without words. And what a great insight about that social impact. And when you were talking about the social impact, I neglected to write down climate and community when you first were sharing that this happened during the pandemic, because that was an impact. That was an impact.
Definitely,
So you talked
definitely.
about your father-in-law's, the impact on your father-in-law of people almost judging him based on a
Yeah,
diagnosis. I'm
right.
curious, what was the impact on you emotionally to experience all this and to witness so much?
So I would say that for me, this was sudden because this was a time when I was applying for my public health education. So this was a time when I was preparing for my entrance exams, for my applications, and I had to postpone many things, but which was okay. But I think the one that affected me most was that uh, whenever me and my husband would have a conversation, it was always about this. So so that was a little, we had like we would talk, but we would always talk about what next. We evolved. No, my the researcher that was inside me, the cancer researcher that was inside me, had become so obsessed with finding things, with reading research articles, and at oftentimes when he is so my husband is calmed down, I would be obsessed with trying to find solutions, and the time when he is obsessed with about something, and then I really want to go and talk, but I know that this is not the right moment to go and interact with him or have a friendly nice conversation, something, or go for a movie even, or go for a dinner together. Those were the things that we didn't do for the 2 long years, and then we found our way to navigate that. We did found our uh, what do you say, a romance back together at the hospital canteens. We just thought that, okay, this is how we'll treat, we'll talk about something else. And the other thing that impacted me was uh, I told you about the hepatectomy when I was staying for the longest time. And because it was pandemic, the caregiver who stays with the patient was not allowed to go back home or travel outside the hospital. I was also caged inside the hospital for those 20 plus days. It was definitely 20 plus 25 days, I believe, including the surgery and the post-surgery recovery. My daughter, she was really upset about this. And she wrote a long letter to me, and she sent me a photo of that when I was in the hospital, that mom, why are you not coming back home? And I think, yes, that was very emotional for me. Yeah, because again, this use, as you said, this happened during a it. I could say that this was the impact of the pandemic. This happened during the COVID pandemic, because of which I was absolutely not having any contact with any family members except for a video call.
So when I think about the emotions that you described, there's guilt. You're in the hospital, you're not with your family, and your daughter is very articulate about letting you know how that impacts her. But you also talk about the pressure of trying to solve this medical situation, the obsession around finding a treatment, finding a cure, figuring this out. So you felt this overwhelming pressure and responsibility to make the situation better.
I did. I did. And I think the way I would say that this particular pressure that I coped with is, I had a couple of, I have very few friends whom I would say, I can just count them, 2 to 3, that's all, whom I would really share with what is going on with me in the hospital. Thankfully, that was my channel through which I would just talk to them about what is happening on a day-to-day basis. And sometimes I would just want to sit and cry. So I have done that. I have done that with my friends, and that was very helpful. And oftentimes when I wanted to take a break, at those times is when I found my way to, learning more, somehow learning was helping me to cope with my stress. So I would learn more things, like I would go to Coursera and pick up a course and complete that course, get a certificate, and that certificate was some a sort of happiness that I got. All these things I'm doing inside the hospital on the attender bed. So
Okay, so that's awesome. So you really value being productive and achieving and accomplishing. Sounds like that's important to you.
I wouldn't define it that way, but it's more about personal moral value, because I know that the patient is unable to, the patient is distressed, and I am at an age when I'm mature enough and I don't do social media. I am not very active on social media except for LinkedIn. So that was the only way out. I don't do YouTube as well. So that was the only way that I found my space to vent out. Or I would have watched movies, but I didn't want to watch it alone. So yeah.
So looking back, if there was something that would have helped you, that would have made it easier, especially during that time where you were in the hospital for all those days, what would have helped you that you didn't have then that you wish you would have now?
One thing is better preparation. I think caregivers should be educated on what to anticipate, because there's this overwhelming sense of so many emotions that you can't even define, and you're juggling through multiple systems. Because you have in your website, when I saw the 17 caregiving system, all I could think of is I cannot talk about one specific system and say, hey, community is something that impacted me, payer is something that impacted me. But these juggling between the systems, it's a complex model. It's like a complex web within itself, and nobody tells you what to expect, and there is no information whatsoever. And for me, what I missed the most was patient stories. So I wanted to check with I did ask my doctor, treating doctor who was treating my father-in-law. I did ask the surgeon and his team that, is there any patient with a similar diagnosis and with a similar incident? Probably he must have been a smoker, but I really don't know what happened before that. But I want to know what happened. Like, he's undergone liver surgery, 35%, 40%, 50% of his liver has been removed. Now the patient is undergoing something very complex, because we've had sleepless nights. We have had sleepless nights as a family. When there are only 3 adults in my family apart from my father-in-law. So my father-in-law is a patient, and me, my husband, and my mother-in-law, we are all staying awake, trying to figure out what is it that we can do. And you won't believe that I did not find information anywhere on the web, on Dr. Google, anywhere. Rather, I found some information, something to help me on a Reddit blog post, where a series of patients have written their experiences. So I'm saying that have a resource for patients where they can learn from experiences of other people. That is very important for a caregiver, because if you go into this, unknown, it is just not going to help your experience of caregiving. You are caregiving because you're a caregiver for a reason, but if you're not doing it the right way, it's going to upset you. It is going to be harmful for the patient also. So I feel that experiences is something we really miss the most.
Swapna, this was fabulous. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story. We so appreciate it. And we thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much for having me here, Denise. It was really nice to share my experience with you. And I hope I did justice to your study.
Absolutely. And I want to invite you, if you're watching, to share your experiences managing, navigating, and advocating within the 17 caregiving systems. You can go to careyearsacademy.com. You'll see the list of stages. You'll see the interview questions, so you won't be surprised. And we'd love to hear your experiences. You can record your interview with me or not. That's okay. But it's most important that we collect these experiences, because you can see it's really helpful. Thank you, Swapna. It was really helpful.
Thank you so much, Denise.
Okay, thanks, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.